Welcome back to the AI Daily Brief. Today, we are talking about 5 debates that are shaping AI. Right now, we are in an interesting and frankly pretty anxious feeling time period when it comes to artificial intelligence. There are questions of its relationship with the economy. There is job-related anxiety. There are questions of productivity and how good it actually is. We're seeing a ton of skepticism, people wondering if we're entering the trough of disillusionment, that famous period in the Gartner hype cycle when the hype of a new technology finally dissipates. So where are things really, and what is the state of the conversation? Now, a quick shout out. If you're not reading The Neuron yet, you should. You can get it at theneurondaily.com. This post was inspired by their morning newsletter today, which was also about 5 major AI debates, although I went in a slightly different direction than some of them. I thought it was a great way to tee off some conversations, even though exactly what they talked about is a little bit different than what I'm going to get into here. First and foremost, one of the two that I think is causing the most anxiety is the question of to what extent AI is propping up the economy versus just in a bubble versus both of those at the same time. And there is certainly a sense that AI is very much at the center of whatever strength there actually is in the economy. That's both from a stock perspective as well as a real spending perspective, which is what's causing some people even more concern. Now, if you've been listening to this show for a while, you'll know that basically ever since the rate hiking cycle began in 2022, it has really been AI enthusiasm versus the world when it comes to stock market performance. In other words, in my estimation, a good chunk of the bull market that we've experienced in stocks is not broad-based economic success, but instead simply incredible enthusiasm around AI that is, of course, backed by the incredible amounts of spending from the big tech companies building out infrastructure. And that was the point of this piece in the New York Times from a couple of weeks ago called "The AI Spending Frenzy is Propping Up the Real Economy Too." They write, "It's no secret by now that optimism around the windfall that artificial intelligence may generate is pumping up the stock market. But in recent months, it's become clear that AI spending is lifting the real economy too." And they write that that's not because of massive enterprise adoption, but because of, as they put it, the sheer amount of investment in data centers, semiconductor factories, and power supply needed to build the computing power that AI demands is creating enough business activity to brighten readings on the entire domestic economy. In 2025, UBS estimates that companies will spend $375 billion on AI infrastructure, a number that'll rise to $500 billion next year. Commerce Department suggested that investment in software and computer equipment, not counting data center buildings, accounted for a quarter of all economic growth in the past quarter. You might have seen that chart that's been flowing around that shows that the amount of spending on traditional offices has converged with the amount of spending on data centers, and that data centers are in fact forecast to exceed spending on traditional offices over the course of this year. While all of this is good news, in the sense that this sort of infrastructure investment has a variety of positive residual effects in the short and medium term, there is a lurking question expressed in the section of the Times piece: how long can the spending last? So this is the setup to this part of the debate, and there are so many places where you can see some version of this. Earlier in August, Axios called this the AI superstimulant. AI and its blood and oxygen, chips, data, and energy are producing an economic superstimulant strong enough to prop up the entire industry. They write, "A wild cycle is unfolding. The biggest companies in history are spending a stunning amount of money to fuel the AI revolution, driving demand for more chips, more energy, and more capital. The dynamic is basically powerful enough to cover for an economy that otherwise looks like it's weakening by the day." And this is, of course, the other side of the story and why this debate exists. It's one thing to ask whether AI spending is overexuberant, but the context of it potentially covering up an economy that otherwise looks like it's weakening, to use Axios' terminology, is where things for some people start to get dicey. Business Insider writes the AI spending boom is boosting US GDP and potentially hiding looming problems. They point to research from Pantheon Macroeconomics, who found that without AI spending, the US economy would have grown at less than 1%, a quote, sign that tech companies are propping up a not-so-great economy. All of this has led to a new type of discourse asking, how bad would it be if this was a bubble and it actually burst? That was the subject of a recent Atlantic piece called "Just How Bad Would an AI Bubble Be?" Now that piece gets into an argument which we're going to talk about in just a minute, which you can see expressed here in the subheadline: the entire US economy is being propped up by the promise of productivity gains that seem very far from materializing. The core of that piece is the Meter study about software developers that we have talked about extensively on the show, and we will recap in just a minute here. Now, without getting into the bubble or not debate, if you are just looking at narratives and discussions, this is getting louder right now. The conversation is on an upswing. A piece in Quartz from just this morning reads, "The AI bubble fears are getting worse. Wall Street doesn't want to talk about it. Wall Street finds itself caught between optimism and anxiety, deploying different vocabularies depending on which side of the ledger it's addressing." In fact, The bubble conversation is now getting so large that you are once again seeing a counter-narrative. It's not just humble podcasters and entrepreneurs like me who are taking the other side of that bet, but prominent tech investors like Ross Gerber, who is quoted in Business Insider today saying that AI is nothing like the dot-com bubble. There's CIO Magazine publishing why the AI bubble is good for business. But again, whatever position you take on this, it is one of the conversations that is absolutely shaping the discourse right now. And I think, frankly, in many ways, capturing a larger economically anxious zeitgeist that doesn't even necessarily have to do anything with AI, but just where AI is the main recipient. Now, part of why AI is the main recipient of this economic anxiety is the whole jobs dimension. And the interesting debate here is that simultaneously, you have a growing chorus of people who are pointing to evidence that AI is taking our jobs, but then at the same time, and often from some of the same people, a discourse about it being overhyped and not actually improving things. Now, on the job side, we've been talking a lot about that Stanford study suggesting that the young employees who are seeing 13% fewer job opportunities than their peers who are not in areas that are as exposed to AI disruption are the canaries in the coal mine, to use their terminology, for the entire industry. Remember, the way that study worked was that they divided all the jobs into 5 categories of how exposed to AI disruption they were, and found that those in the 5th category, the most exposed, saw a 13% relative decline for the youngest workers in the US. Recently, another paper looked at resume and job posting data on around 285,000 US firms over the last 4 years, and found that while senior roles didn't seem to be affected, Gen AI did seem to be reducing the number of junior roles. Now, as we discussed, I think on Friday, there is a difference between acknowledging a decrease in hiring in general for young people in junior roles and a clear determination that it's because of artificial intelligence. As Professor Ethan Mollick put it, the fact that junior hiring in AI-intensive fields has slowed down somewhat in the US seems pretty solid. The evidence linking it to AI is not yet established. We've seen a couple solid attempts that suggest a connection, but it's really hard to tell for sure given the data. Stating the obvious but important thing, he says, a lot of macroeconomic things are happening at once, and a short time frame making teasing apart the details challenging. Still, again, from a narrative perspective, this is getting louder and louder. And what's more, there are some prominent voices in the industry that are doubling down on their calls that this is going to be an issue. Earlier in the year, Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei said that he thought that about half of entry-level white-collar jobs could be wiped out by AI, and in a recent podcast appearance, he doubled down on that prediction. Some are extending this even farther, with CNBC publishing a piece, AI is not just ending entry-level jobs, it's the end of the career ladder as we know it. Take that, though, and compare it to this other discourse about AI not being all that good. From theconversation.com, does AI actually boost productivity? The evidence is murky. And then, of course, we have that much ballyhooed study from Meter, summed up in this Reuters piece, AI slows down some experienced software developers, study finds. I remember seeing some comedian years and years ago, in a very different political climate, mind you, who had a joke that ran something along the lines of, are the immigrants lazy or are they taking our jobs? Because it can't be both, guys. And I sort of a little bit feel like that's the nature of this discourse right now around AI jobs and productivity. On the one hand, we have all of this pointing to evidence that AI is undoing economic opportunity for people. But on the other hand, this other discourse suggesting that productivity gains aren't all that they're cracked up to be. And it's kind of like, is AI not actually all that good, or is it taking our jobs? Because it's really hard to see how it could be both. Now, of course, if you take a step away, you can find a study right now that supports any position you want to take on this. Goldman Sachs investment research recently found, for example, that the cumulative evidence that they looked at across academic studies and company anecdotes put labor productivity boost around 27 to 31% for AI. And the point is that what I think is going on more than anything else is this broader pattern of economic anxiety. I think that economic anxiety is bleeding into everything, including the AI discourse, making it all very, very murky. Now, one area where there is some specific debate around that productivity question is how good vibe coding really is. Now, I've made the argument that we are on a mainstreaming trajectory where vibe coding is increasingly just agentic coding, but along the lines of this broader anxiety that we keep discussing, there is again a growing discourse that is trying to claim that vibe coding too is in fact overhyped and not all it's cracked up to be. Now, this isn't all that surprising to me that vibe coding specifically would see some amount of this skepticism. Basically, I think that agentic coding is quite clearly the breakout AI use case, or agentic use case at least. For 2025, it is everywhere from consumer to enterprises. Every survey that people do shows that it is the thing that is happening the most inside organizations, but it's also something that has been very, very quickly evolving. This time last year, vibe coding wasn't a thing. It wasn't even a term that was coined until February of this year, and it really took the reasoning models, and even more specifically the launch of Claude 3.5 Sonnet, to really enter this new agentic coding era. Some of the skepticism have come from people that you might generously call builders themselves, although you could quibble with that in this case. In August, for example, SPAC King Chamath Palihapitiya tweeted, "It's unpopular to say, but it's true. You can't vibe anything useful right now. You can barely vibe a working product, and there are still virtually zero examples of anything even moderately useful or successful that was vibed, especially considering how much money has been spent so far on LLM calls to try and do so. This won't be true forever, but is true today. As with other tech cycles, a trough of disillusionment may soon come as folks get frustrated and give up." So, is this just Chamath trying to sound clever and ahead of the narrative, or is there something more real here? More recently, people have been revisiting a prediction from Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei, where he suggested that around this time, AI could be writing as much as 90% of all code. The Information last week wrote a piece called "Why Anthropic's Coding Prediction Hasn't Panned Out." In that same piece, they actually asked Claude, the chatbot, of course, of Anthropic, to grade the prediction, with Claude giving it an F. The Information said that Claude cited various industry surveys, estimating that about 40% of all code is AI generated, but only 20 to 25% of code that actually makes it into production is AI generated. Now, there was nuance even in this Information piece. For example, Rahul, the CEO of Julius, said that he, quote, "wouldn't be surprised if something like 90% of front-end code is being written or initially drafted by AI, but he thinks there's probably a gap in terms of what makes it production, and he thinks that it's probably lower when it comes to back-end code." Now, this conversation to me was just absolutely batty. It was quickly seized upon by the AI skeptics as another example of why we were getting out over our skis when it came to AI hype. Yet I'm sitting here looking at the idea that inside of a year or so, somewhere between 20 and 40% of code is being written by a thing that couldn't write code around this time last year, and we're somehow viewing that as things being overhyped. It just seems insane to me. Ethan Malik wrote, "The funny thing about the prediction that AI would be writing 90% of all code by now is that the prediction's failure distracts from the fact that AI adoption in code writing is actually extremely high." Now, he points to over 30%, according to one measure, all the way back in December 2024. You also have folks like Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong claiming that around 40% of daily code written at that company is currently AI generated, and that he wants to get it to 50% by October. That's up from under 20% back in April, meaning that in 6 months, the percentage of code that's written by AI at Coinbase has doubled. Flipping back on the other side, you have people who are pointing to Google Trends, suggesting that searches for Lovable, Claude Code, Replit, Cursor are all down from their peak at the beginning of August. But then to me, maybe the more interesting story is what evidence we have that vibe coding is producing things that people are actually using. Olivia Moore from A16Z writes, "The biggest untold story around vibe coding is the explosion of the accompanying stack. One example is Supabase, which many vibe coding apps recommend as a backend database. It's been around for 5 years, but traffic has skyrocketed with the rise of Lovable, Replit, etc. We also recently discussed Lovable CEO Anton Osika, suggesting that the way that the company wants to measure its success from now on is how many visits are going to apps built with Lovable, rather than just how many people are using the tool. Last week, Antoine tweeted, "Lovable apps have officially been visited 100 million times in the last 2 months. With that milestone, we're changing Lovable's success metric to be proportional to the traffic users' products get, because if our users succeed, we succeed." Finally, we come back to Dario, who just did another interview last week with a BBC reporter, who doubled down and said that 90% of code at Anthropic is written or at least suggested by AI. Prinz on Twitter writes, "When he says 90% of code at Anthropic is written or suggested by AI, what he means is, and if that's not the case for your company yet, that's a skill issue." We've gone through 3 debates so far in some amount of detail. We'll talk about the last 2 a little bit more quickly. The fourth is one that I'm kind of bundling together, which is open source and soft power versus the push to stop China, which is more broadly, I think, a part of an acceleration versus deceleration meta debate that has been with us ever since the beginning of ChatGPT. On the China front, of course, a lot of 2025 has been racing to readjust our priors in the wake of DeepSeek coming out and totally changing how far behind, or rather how not far behind, China is when it comes to their models. When the White House dropped America's AI action plan this summer, one of the things that was interesting was a shift on open source. Inside the China chip export regime, some of the same logic had applied to open source software, where basically American policymakers were concerned that if we encouraged open source, it would allow Chinese companies to copy American models. And yet, in the new official policy, they wrote, "We need to ensure America has leading open models founded on American values. Open source and open weight models could become global standards in some areas of business and in academic research worldwide. For that reason, they also have geostrategic value. While the decision of whether and how to release an open or closed model is fundamentally up to the developer, the federal government should create a supportive environment for open models. Now, of course, since then, we've gotten the first OpenAI open model in a number of years, but it's still pretty touch and go about broader questions like chip access. We've gone into a lot of detail about this particular debate in other shows, and there's nothing hugely new here, so I'll leave it there for now. I just think that you can't really talk about the debate shaping AI without talking about this one, which is such a big driver of policy right now. Now, one story that has gotten a little bit of resonance in the past few days that's about the broader acceleration versus deceleration theme are these new hunger strikes going on outside the offices of some major AI labs. On September 4th, Guido Reichstadter wrote, "I'm on hunger strike outside of the offices of the AI company Anthropic right now because we are in an emergency. Anthropic and other AI companies are racing to create ever more powerful AI systems. These AIs are being used to inflict serious harm on our society today and threaten to inflict increasingly greater damage tomorrow. Experts are warning us that this race to ever more powerful AGI puts our lives and well-being at risk, as well as the lives and well-being of our loved ones." Now, so far at least, this hasn't gotten a huge amount of resonance or traction. Chubby on X writes, "The most foolish thing about his hunger strike against AI is that he does not provide a single argument as to what the danger of AI would be and how it would pose a threat. It is just wild resentment mixed with a feeling of fear without any profound criticism." This prompted another hunger strike, this time from someone named Michael Trozzi outside of Google's DeepMind office in London. It's basically just a copy of the same post from Guido, and got even less resonance. Some are claiming that Michael is a failed AI entrepreneur who's just looking for a way to get some attention. I don't know enough to comment strongly on that. What I am watching is to see whether this actually picks up any sort of attention in mainstream press, or whether it stays confined to Twitter/X. The last debate that I want to just mention, and I'm going to go extremely quickly on this because I think it's going to be a full show later this week, is that if all of these are big sort of macro debates around the state of AI, how good it is, whether we're in a bubble, are we heading towards a trough of disillusionment, there are also debates happening inside the AI industry about a variety of interesting technical topics. Now, to some extent, these are even more interesting because they have direct resonance in terms of how AI is getting built. The one that I've been seeing a lot of recently is a debate around evals. Entrepreneur Justin Torre wrote, "Literally F evals. We wasted so much time at Helicone building evals because quote-unquote customers wanted it, but this is a classic example of the mom test. We needed to distinguish the core customer problem with what they are asking for." Alex Riebman wrote a post called "Evals are a scam and we're being gaslit into believing they aren't." Now, some people are trying to bring nuance to the conversation. Eugene Yan wrote, "I've seen teams try to apply evals and get the same outcome and gain reluctance to eval. This is because they used off-the-shelf evals by eval platforms like faithfulness, cohesion, and helpfulness. Generic evals aren't useful. Your evals must be aligned with your user problem, and if they're not, you're just measuring noise." In any case, like I said, this is interesting enough that I think it's going to be an entire episode. So I'm flagging it in the context of this show just as a stand-in for all of the interesting technical and builder debates that are happening under the surface as well. So guys, those are 5 debates shaping AI right now. The field as ever remains dynamic, interesting, and increasingly a receptacle for society's broader anxiety. How much challenge that creates for us in the next few months, we'll just have to wait and see. For now, that's going to do it for today's AI Daily Brief. Until next time, peace